This week on the Droids, the High Republic Light of the Jedi, chapters 6 through 10. We keep going with the book club here on the Droids. So excited to talk more about the High Republic this week on the Droids. Welcome back to the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Alongside Chris and Ryan, I am Mike. And guys, I've been described as a tinkerer, a loner, never doing things the same way twice and unwilling to explain why I do things the way I do. It's probably why I'm still a knight and not a master. Would you agree?
I'm glad
but
you
you'll
said
only
it.
work with two people, and we're them. There used to be another one, but he's gone now.
I'm glad you said something, Mike.
I love that description, to be honest.
Yeah,
I was like, that's pretty much, if I could limit my communication at my place of work to only two other people that I respect, I think that's the way I prefer to handle things.
Speaking of limited communication, Sam, you're 3 episodes from Impact.
Oh. Sam, you'll get that when you read the book.
And then you're going to get to 2.7 and then a 2.6 because it'll start out at about 3 and then it jumps a couple hours and then it's because I'm surprised we're now into about a 5 to 10 minute range, whereas before we were jumping hours.
Yeah, it's getting
the logic on this light speed is kind of
it's starting to feel like an arc of Dragon Ball Z, where at the end of every episode only 3 minutes have passed.
Well, we are excited to be talking about chapter 6 through 10 of The Light of the Jedi, Charles Soule's book from the High Republic. There's not a lot of major news outside of that Star Wars-wise, so for those of you who tune in regularly for the Star Wars news, that will continue to come back. We'll talk about that before we do each of these episodes, book club-wise, but be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Droids Pod, Droids Podcast, YouTube, The Playthrough of Fallen Order. Got to check it out before it becomes the biggest thing in the universe.
Getting there.
Droids Pod and droidspod@gmail.com. Rate and review us on iTunes. Please, if you're enjoying the show, let us know. It really, every time we see one, it lifts our spirits in a big way. We really enjoy hearing from you and that you're enjoying the show. So if you can rate and review us on iTunes, it helps bump up our ability to be seen as a podcast. And guys, we're on TikTok now.
It's happened.
This has been a joke. It's been a joke for, I think, at least like 6 or 7 episodes. We've had an account, but we hadn't done anything with it. But now we got 3 talks up there.
Yeah, we got 3 talks. One of them went considerably huge. So maybe you're here because you saw that. And I hope that we're living up to the promise.
Yeah. Can we put
I hope we're living up to the talk of the tick that you saw.
Can we put the podcast on TikTok? Is that an option?
Yeah, it's a 60-second limit, so...
All right, well, we can tighten up a few.
Feel like people would probably appreciate if this thing was 60 seconds.
I think our last episode would have been a 67-part TikTok. I can do that. That actually,
let's do it.
I bet you for that effort, we'd get a lot of praise for breaking it up.
Yeah.
I'm sure people would love it if we flooded their feeds. We'd get a lot of praise.
I mean, the feed on TikTok's a very different kind of thing. You're not going to get flooded. I don't think.
All right.
We'll see how it goes. We'll consider doing that. But
that's a little peek behind the sausage.
Yeah, if you've joined us because of TikTok, again, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. 3 of us are here. We've got our 4th Sam as well. We've got some great episodes to go back through. Our instant reactions going back to The Last Jedi. We've had one for every Star Wars movie since then, as well as The Mandalorian. We go episode by episode and break down each of that. We are looking forward to talking more about Clone Wars. Those of this group have caught up on Clone Wars who didn't watch it earlier. I know it's a travesty. How could we possibly have waited? But we did. And we're going to talk about some of those Clone Wars arcs in the near future. But let's dive in. Chapter 6 through 10, where we left off, we had our great friends, the new Jedi that we got to know. Kind of interesting how a lot of these chapters are cliffhangers. You know, there's a lot of, we'll come back to it later. You move on to a different segment of what's happening around the Hetzel system. You don't necessarily stick with anybody. You know, you go back to them, but it was Bell, Zettifar, the Padawan, and Loden Greatstorm. They were jumping out of their vector down to the planet, the main system, or Hetzel Prime, I guess I should say, to deal with an issue on the ground. And then we move from there back into out into space, where we are learning a little bit more about the other people, other members of the Republic, as well as other Jedi who are trying to figure out how to deal with this. And I think I'm curious just overall thoughts here, because I think it's, we knew where we were with how things were presented to us in terms of the different objects that were headed towards the planet. And now we're getting more of like, all right, how is everyone just dissecting how they're going to deal with this? And I think the thing that surprised me is I almost thought, I know we had the countdown to impact. And I guess the countdown to impact is implying that the impact is going to be when any of these start to actually hit. Maybe, or it could be something else.
Yeah, or is it a reference to a future event?
Yeah. But I'm surprised we're kind of
well, it's definitely a reference to a future event.
But I mean, but nothing that we've seen yet or heard of yet.
Right.
Yeah, nothing that we know of yet. But it was surprising to me that we were now getting different angles that kept going. We kind of already had these different angles and different perspectives. And now we're getting more of that with more things happening. We're really living in this space of Hetzel's system and this crisis more than I thought we would.
Yeah, it continuously keeps throwing new characters at us and new, like, just different perspectives of this potential catastrophe.
It's doing that classic Star Wars cross-cutting.
It is, isn't it? I was thinking of the
parallel storytelling. Parallel storytelling.
I mean, it is great for the momentum of the story.
Yeah.
I'll say this. Speaking of cliffhangers, our assignment was to read chapters 6 through 10. When I reached the end of chapter 10, I said, I'm moving on to chapter 11.
Oh, boy.
Granted, chapter 11 was 2.5 pages. But I read ahead. I did read ahead.
Wow.
Oh, no, don't spoil anything for those of us who stopped at chapter 10.
Yeah, like a good boy.
I dare not. But I think that
it's moving.
Man, this story's got a motor on it.
You know what I
mean?
This thing's moving like a piece of space dirt going through hyperspace.
That's right.
So
was
as
that
we
worthy
start
of the TikTok? I now I feel like we're all trying to live up to the TikTok. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can maybe make this a song.
A song and a dance. Well, I think, though, let's talk about chapter 6. We'll go through each of the bits, but I think there's interesting new characters who are introduced. And I think you mentioned it, Chris. I kind of wonder when we're going to start to stick with some characters. And maybe it's a little bit further down the road of like, okay, they've addressed this overall issue. And then we start to like really jump in with Avar Chris and, and the other Jedi, and we spend more time there. I don't mind being introduced to more, but I think if I wasn't doing this for the podcast and if I wasn't reading back a little bit to reread some things to be prepared for the podcast, I think I'd be like, wait, who's that? I'm getting a little confused with the number of characters.
It's a little tough because they're using names that are, phonetically challenging for sure. And then
we're going to have some interesting pronunciations as we go through this.
Yeah, they're phonetically challenging,
look at them as
so
symbols.
They don't resemble words that we know, and also we only have the image we're getting in our brain, so it's a little tougher to connect those things.
Yeah. Well,
to be like, if you see a Wookiee, you know that's the Wookiee.
Right.
And if you don't know their name, it's still, and if you see the guy with the brown hair, you know that's the guy with the brown hair.
Yeah. Maybe
so it is a little more challenging that way.
Maybe it's describing the panic of the situation. Things are moving so fast, you can't tell who's who or what's what.
But
everyone is working to the same goal.
But
they all are part of the song of the Force.
I feel like when I'm reading it, I'm not having trouble keeping everybody straight. But if you asked me anyone's name besides Avar Chris or Loading Greatstorm, I'd have a hard time.
Yeah, I read chapter 6, and then by the time I got to 10, I was like, who is this guy?
Who was that again?
And legitimately, because when you read, I don't know about you guys. I'm not reading out loud. Chris, I know that you still sometimes read out loud, but
I'll do it. Scream out loud. I was screaming it. You sure about this, Captain?
But you don't. You recognize the shapes of words more than you recognize actually what
I think that might actually be a true statement.
No, it is. It is. Yeah. It's the reason that you can read if you mix up the middle of the letters of words, but if the first and the last letter are the same, you can kind of read it still.
Yeah, yeah.
You recognize the shapes of words, so I think that it's like one of those things where I haven't had to say these names out loud, so I just kind of take them in for what the image of the word.
Yes, exactly.
But Loading Greatstorm, of course, because I'm writing a concept album about him.
Right. Well, I think I made notes just to be like, okay, how am I going to say this when we actually talk about it on the pod? And we may get it wrong. And those of you who've listened to any official Star Wars High Republic, there is a High Republic show, I think, premiering at the end of the month on StarWars.com, where we'll probably get a better pronunciation and we can be all like, oh, that's how you say
Yoda.
Mikhail Sutanmi.
Yoda.
But let's talk about Chapter 6. We are in a long beam, the Aurora 9, 75 minutes to impact. We are introduced to 3 characters here. It's Petty Officer Inaman, Captain Bright, who is a Nautilon, also known as the same species of good old Kit Fisto.
Kit Fisto.
Yeah.
Which, when they introduced him and talked about his description, they didn't say it was a Nautilon right away. And so I was like, his kind of sounds a bit like Kit Fisto, the way they're describing him.
And you know what? Well done. Because they described it, and I was like, I know exactly what this dude looks like. He looks like Kit Fisto. Stephen King has described writing as communicating telepathically by putting what's in the writer's head into the reader's head. And I thought they did a great job of doing that.
I'm impressed with Charles Soule's
Kit Fisto's head.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with Charles Soule's writing as well. Yeah. I'm going to say that up front. I don't mean that condescendingly to Mr. Soule. I haven't read his work before. I think that in a world where the writing in a Star Wars book doesn't necessarily have to be good, this is very good.
It continues to be, and I don't feel like we're losing any steam here, and obviously not losing any steam with the situation they're dealing with. But the writing continues to impress me,
and I'm confident that his writing ability will continue through to the end of the book. Unless
I think
it really falls apart in the middle.
Well, unless there was some sort of introduction of some studio head who said, change the way it is in Act 3 and ignore what you did in the first 2 acts. And
if Luke Skywalker shows up, I swear.
Oh boy.
This is all about how Sheev came to power.
Wait, are you telling me that the fall of the Jedi is... Wait, this is the height of the Jedi, and then there's the fall of the Jedi? Are these supposed to be better than George's characters? Can I ask a question? When did the idea of a character being a well-constructed character have to do with their on-screen power? What is that?
That's people who don't.
That's a real
watch
question.
Any
Like
other
people
movies
saying that, like something.
Else.
I understand that we're talking about ridiculous people, but like people saying that calling the prequels the fall of the Jedi when that is what happens in the prequels. Spoiler alert. Saying that it means that these characters are better and more powerful than George's characters. What does like a character's power have to do with whether they're a well-drawn character? That's stupid.
Nothing.
Anyway, go on.
It doesn't make any sense.
I know you guys agree with me. Go on. That's stupid.
Yes. But the action and what they have to do here from this long beam is they're trying to take out the moving target of the objects that are making their way to the system. They talk about it being a brand new long beam, which comes from Hosnian Prime. If anybody remembers from The Force Awakens, it is the home of the New Republic that then gets destroyed by Starkiller Base.
So fast.
Nice little nugget there.
Then we get to see it.
This is the crew that's really trying to figure out what they can do and save this solar collection station apparatus. Unfortunately, they're not able to do it. They lose out on their 6 missiles. None of them hit home. The odds were not in their favor. 1 in 3 odds that they could actually hit the moving target. They fired all 6 at it. Didn't get anywhere. And unfortunately, didn't complete their mission.
That's some Star Wars comfort. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that's some Star Wars comfort food, just playing the odds.
Yeah.
Playing the odds. And they did this thing, I don't know if you guys did this, where he said, if there's 3, that means there's double the chance. They said there's 1 in 6 chance.
Yeah.
Then he said if there's 3, there's double the chance. And that's the end of a page. And then before I turned the page, I spent like 5 minutes being like, that math can't be right. Like, and I was doing that, like, how do you add, like, odds? How do you add the fractions of, like, the chances of things? Is it a permutation? What am I doing? Is it times 6? And then I turn the page, and the next line of dialogue is, I know the math doesn't work out.
Exactly. Yeah, that was very satisfying.
I like this, the Peoples character who has a tendency to make jokes at the wrong time.
Yeah. I like that they talk about that as like a species flaw. And I thought I was like, that's really funny because you could just, we all know species members of our own species like that.
Oh, yes, we do. You may be talking to one right now.
Or I am the one. But within that, it felt like this kind of self-contained story again that he's able to execute in these chapters, because we are jumping around I honestly kind of felt like we were in a submarine-esque story, Hunt for Red October style. They're watching this display. The missiles are disappearing. They're trying to shoot something down before it actually makes any impact. It felt very much like these submarine stories of the past, which is not a surprise because that's been a lot of what space, fantasy has been for a long time.
At its heart, Star Wars has always been a submarine story.
I always thought of it as the Hunt for Red October in space.
Right. Yeah.
In Western space.
Opera.
But I think the other thing I enjoyed, and I don't know if this is something that is very commonly known about Nautiluans, is that the tentacles, he can sense the pheromones of his shipmates.
Well,
and he knew that their emotional states
very
were
well known.
terrified.
I can make, Mike, I'm insulted that you'd even bring it up.
Duh.
It could make for some awkward, interactions if you could smell the pheromones. You know what I'm saying?
Was that
But I
you
think
or was that me?
you got into a little bit of the humor with Peoples. I've been pleasantly surprised overall, and we can talk about this beyond Chapter 6. I'm enjoying the humor of this book.
I've laughed out loud.
Yes, so have I. And I'm not an easy customer in terms of laughing out loud anymore because we're all so overexposed to a million things that the fact that these jokes are getting me, I'm very pleased and enjoying it very much.
It's true. Do you think have you been overexposed to comedy because comedians have been doing such great work about the last 4 years?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, really, it's the comedy that I hear from you fine fellows every week on this podcast.
Is it that Jimmy Fallon's Trump impression is just so funny?
It's so good. And when you tuff somebody's hair and just tussle it a little bit.
Yeah, and then you change your route and you're like, I'm gonna do a scathing impression. What a edgy comedian. Yeah, I get it though. It really has ruined comedy. But it's I have like genuinely chuckled to the point that like my wife is like, "What are you reading?"
You're like,
I think Loud and Great Storm has had some really fun moments. I liked Peoples, as you said at one point, where he's talking about all the best gunners in the universe, but I would guess I'm barely in the top 10. I thought that was pretty funny as well.
There was a great line where they oh my god, I forget his name, but like the husband and wife pilots.
Oh, Joss Adron?
Joss, yes. He calls up one of the Jedi and he's like, you know how you can move stuff with your mind? And they're like, it says literally, there was a pause. And then they're like, we communicate with the Force to make it do it. But yes, I know what you mean. I was like, that's great. That's good stuff. That would work in a movie too.
That's really good. Brian, when you read it, do you have like a Mad magazine that you put on top of it? And when Nicole's like, what are you reading?
Yeah. Well, first she says, what are you reading? I hate it when you laugh. And then, I have a Mad magazine, the height of comedy, so people can understand why I'm laughing so hard.
You cover the book. You're like, something I read.
There were like stories when the first Harry Potter came out of like businessmen on subways putting John Grisham covers over the Harry Potter, so people wouldn't know.
Well, and also them releasing adult covers of the Harry Potter books, that
like ones with boobs and stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. Yeah.
The Chamber of Secrets is a very different Chamber of Secrets.
Oh, baby. The Philosopher's Stones, you know what I mean?
Hey, we're recording this at past 9, but that doesn't mean it goes, people listen to it past 9.
Well, it ends as they unfortunately fail at their chance. As they fail at their chance to save the solar array. And honestly, this is...
Real quick, Order of the Phoenix writes itself, right? Okay. We all have that.
All right,
I said Order of the Phoenix, we all know. Go on.
Okay. All right.
J.K. Rowling is a monster. Just saying. Go on.
Boy. Oh, boy.
Hey.
She is
newcomers. It's not always like this on the pod.
J.K. Rowling is a monster, though. Go on.
We're not disagreeing with you. We're just trying to talk about the Star Wars we all came here to talk about. The Hetzel system.
What house do you think you guys would be in?
Gryffindor.
Jedi. I don't know the Harry Potter stuff enough.
That's fine. Go on. We'll start a different.
I would have joined in, but I haven't read it.
No, I'm just teasing Mike at this point.
That's because he's a Hufflepuff.
No, because I hear the author is a horrible person.
That's why you didn't read it for the last 25 years.
The last 20 plus years.
I guess so. I was ahead of the curve.
You knew.
Mike, you're completely right. He's
ahead on that one. Ahead on that one.
The Hetzel system doesn't have any houses. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I mean, some houses, but not houses in that sense.
Right.
very concerned about the prospects for the Hetzel system, not only because of the impact that we're counting down towards, but losing their solar array. How is this entire system built on their agriculture going to continue to survive? That seems pretty detrimental.
Thing that it like redirects all of the solar energy where it needs to go. What a cool concept. I mean, I'm sorry that it exploded.
Yeah,
but I was glad to hear what it was.
Cool. Yeah, I was like, can we have that? Should we have one of those?
We should have one of those.
Christopher
Can we get
Nolan
an executive
dreamed
order on one of those?
Yeah, let's start building it. I'll get some
the
mirrors.
Space Force is ready.
I'll get some mirrors.
Well,
Yeah,
so I
think
like
that would do the trick.
I like the way that this ended with Inman saying, we're all the Republic, right? We're in this. I just felt like it was a nice moment to say that they're calling back to what is that mantra of the Republic,
right?
From Lena So,
who we see. We meet
a little bit over a view screen.
Yes,
in some way.
I think they're setting. I think the book is setting up the Republic like this saying like we're all the Republic. Like I think there's this. They're front loading it because I think there's going to be a setup where some people can't be the Republic. It's going to make them make a very hard choice.
I do think there's going to be a thing where it's like you say we're all the Republic, but you don't think about this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think there's a blind optimism here that's much like the pieces of debris that are flying at them at light speed.
Yeah, because they're talking about the Outer Rim. I feel like it's prime for someone to be like, we're the people the Republic had forgotten.
Yes.
And they should be, attacking things like that. They should be deconstructing that idea.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So chapter 7, we move into Above the Fruited Moon, where we're introduced to a few more.
I love the name.
A few more
Fruited
Jedi.
Moon.
And the character you talked about from the Republic, the long beam pilot of Joss Adrin and his wife Pika. We get a little bit of them in this. It's more of, I'm pronouncing it probably incorrectly, but Tiami, who is the Jedi Master that we are spending most of our time in this chapter with, kind of wondering about their involvement and how well they're going to be able to execute their mission. They've been given a mission just to go and take out one of these objects. And in this, we learn a little bit more about these different Jedi. I found it fascinating to learn a little bit more about the vectors, too, and how they're controlled by the lightsaber. And it's such a cool idea.
So cool.
So for those of you...
She spared a tendril of the Force to lift the lightsaber hilt. That was awesome.
And so those of you who have not read this, who are just enjoying kind of going for the ride with us and enjoying this conversation, is that the weapons and what you can use on a vector is only operated with a lightsaber key. So it ensures that only a Jedi can be using a vector's weapons, which is pretty cool and a very cool way to consider it, and something we've never seen before with a lightsaber.
I feel like...
How about the description of her lightsaber, too?
Yeah.
That was great. It's like no matter how broken something is, there's always light on the inside.
Beautiful.
It's so nice, and then you're like, you'll never see an uglier lightsaber than they made a point to really go down on it. Yeah. I also love the idea. I keep thinking of these vectors as like a professional camera, where it's like if you get a really good camera, you have to just know how to do everything like precisely and like where all the buttons are and everything, as opposed to like an automatic camera. So I think these vectors for the Jedi are like they're prosumer level. They might seem to an amateur like, oh, this ship sucks, but like if you're a pro Jedi using it, you'd be like, this is the greatest ship you can possibly have because you can do anything in it.
Yeah, like you have to have a level of knowledge to understand how good it is.
Exactly.
Or unless it would just be frustrating.
Well, which continues to add to the mystique. There's so many things that you can do and talk about, and it's actually kind of funny that we talk about the humor again and comes back later where you talk about what Jedis represent and what maybe the average person sees when they see a Jedi. But when we learn about how they can operate the vectors and what they can do with their lightsaber to control that, I think it's like you just continue to add to the lore, and it's great that we can have new stuff that is adding to this lore and making us be like, oh, I'd actually love to see that at some point in potentially cinema.
Also, it's giving this really unique perspective of us understanding from an internal perspective the Jedi's experience of the Force.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Jedi, I know it would be Jedi plural, like the Jedi possessives experience of the Force, which is like and each one describes it separate ways, which is interesting. Like each one is individualized. And like later Avar Kriss keeps calling it the Song of the Force and she's listening for the melody.
Yeah.
And like Te Ami is or Tayami is like talking about like releasing tendrils of the Force so that she can like lift things and things like. I just think it's really dynamic the way that he's describing these things, and it to me it's giving me a different perspective on the Force than I've had from other Star Wars media, which is always appreciated.
And I think all of us, with the exception of Sam, we haven't read a lot of Star Wars books. I mean, the host formerly
I haven't heard that name for a long, long time.
Well, Chris, I don't recall. Did you read a lot of Expanded Universe?
No, I read the word Expanded Universe, but that's about it.
But like a million times, so he's
like
read that a lot.
So I guess a lot, yeah.
But to put us into the subconscious of these Jedi is kind of opening things up to a different world where we're hearing their perspective, we're hearing their conscious, we're hearing their voice is really cool.
And it's really cool to see kind of the heightening of Jedi powers as well. So it's kind of like they're using these powers on a level that we've not seen before, which is like fully realized Jedi abilities. And I'm sure there's a story that takes place before this point where they use them differently too, which I just think is cool.
Not
Chris,
more powerful than Luke, though. Right? You're not saying that.
Oh, Ryan.
Though.
Ryan.
I think that's a
George
really
Lucas
fascinating.
called me and he said, all of these Jedi are way more powerful than Luke.
No, he did not.
Yes, he did last night.
Well, he ruined the prequels.
I recorded it.
So he doesn't know.
For those of you who've listened to this the first time, that is not Ryan's real thought.
No, I love the prequels. And if you are listening for the first time, this is not a joke. If you are listening for the first time, listen back to us talk about the prequels, and you will hear me change the minds of everyone else on this podcast and possibly the world about thinking that the prequels are lesser than. I love the prequels. Make a TikTok about that, Mike.
Okay, sounds good.
And then George took his mask off, and he was one of the masked singers. It was a crazy night.
It was him and Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, it was crazy. Wild.
Chris, though, I do think you bring up a really fascinating point, is that I'm sure in the discussions of creating the High Republic, they were like, look, we need to show them in a different form. We need to show them doing things that we've never seen Jedis do before, because we've never seen Jedis at the height of their power in this way. Now, obviously, in the prequels, I think they were probably capable of all these things, but they were very reserved, thinking that there wasn't the threat that it was.
And they also had some restrictions from the society that they lived in. They weren't running the show. It looks like right now they're kind of running the show.
Pretty much.
Also,
The Republic
I think,
turns everything over to them when they need it.
Yeah.
Also, I'd rather see them kind of like jiggle continuity a little bit than like have us never be able to see anything new because like it wasn't in the prequels or something.
Right.
It's like whatever. Like, all right, play a
course.
little loose with it. It's fine.
But I think we're seeing that with Master Chris and the Song of the Force. I mean, Tiami talks about in this how she's always in the back of her mind. She's a presence there. She's not speaking to her, but she's there. And this bond, this connection. I think in ways I'm giving too much credit to The Last Jedi, but I feel like there were some things that were introduced in that had been part of canon in a way. Those side books, I think, where Ryan Johnson even brought up on Twitter at one point where someone said Force projection, that's not part of this, and then he showed where it was in like the Path of the Jedi book.
Right, yeah.
They're using some of these things and like Force connections across worlds, about distances that they can still use the Force and communicate, which we've seen in these first 10 chapters, is really intriguing to me, and I feel like plays off of, hey, you brought some things that were maybe outside of the norm Star Wars storytelling into the norm with The Last Jedi, and here they are also in a book. Again, I might be giving too much credit there, and I'm sure some people who've read much more than I have in Star Wars canon might say differently. But I found that really cool, and I love that, and we're going to get a little bit more into it because Avar Kriss is the next chapter. It's really about her and that connection. But before we leave this, we're introduced to Mikhail Sutmani, Nib Assek, and Buryaga Agaburi, who's a Padawan Wookiee, our first Wookiee Jedi, but in this instance a Padawan. A very cool thing is that as they seem to be on the verge of taking out the object on its way towards the planet, is when the emotions of Buryaga take over, and they feel like they need to disconnect Buryaga from the Force connection that they all have so they can complete their job. But that's when they realize that he's reflecting the emotions of those who are part of the debris and actually on the debris, which we have to assume is from the Legacy run from earlier in the book, as they're all making their way towards the planet, and they realize that these aren't just some random objects. They are actual debris with life forms on it that they need to save.
I love.
Yeah, that was a great. Yeah. That was great. This chapter, I believe, because they're speaking about Avar Kriss in this chapter from Taami's perspective. They also introduced the idea that Avar Kriss is able to kind of connect everybody as nodes of the Force into like a network, essentially.
Yeah,
which was so cool. And Chris, I know you loved that. You're into mesh networks, my man.
I love mesh networking. Give me a proprietary base net. I think I love that idea too. They describe it with like a cool nuance where it's like it's better than an intercom. You're not really like listening, but it's like a radio station kind of in the back of your mind where you hear what you need to hear when you need to hear. Like,
it could give locations.
Yeah, like
things like that.
It's not necessarily like a thought. It could just put the thought of like this thing is over here in your head. Like, I think that's the cool difference than saying like, yeah, they can just talk to each other through their minds. Like, I think that's too easy. I think they made it. They did some work here and
kept it mysterious.
Yeah,
kept
exactly.
It a little bit like harder to define this is what it is.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, it kind of on a micro level from like what their actual mission is of like building the Starlight Beacon, which is basically like a larger version of them doing this kind of thing to get communications out there, I think is a very cool like meta example within the story itself. Like they're designing technology to mimic what the Force does.
They also this is a small thing about like how kind of unified the Jedi Order is at this point, that they talk about I'm sorry, what's the Wookiee's name again?
Uriaga.
Yeah, right. Exactly. They talk about how his master learned Shiruki, right? I believe Shiruki, the Wookiee language, just to teach him. Like, they learned it just for that reason. And that's like a nice thing. And also the way when he like when they're perceiving that he's getting too overwhelmed with the mission and he's scared, they're very kind about it.
They're almost like overdoing it. They're like, no shame, don't worry.
Yeah, like, don't worry, young one.
It's great that you're here.
One of them says like, it's a very sweet line. She says like, don't worry, little one.
Yeah.
I was like, it's a Wookiee. He's not little.
He's probably like 100 years old.
Calls him Burry. Shortens his name to Burry. So there's a fondness there as well. But I think the contrast is really cool from what we have here in chapter 7 to what we then find in chapter 10, because we're seeing two sides of the same conversation. And here we're talking about that perspective that the Jedi have and the kind of insular voice that we now know a little bit more about how they treat each other. And then in chapter 10, as you alluded to, Ryan, there's a little bit of like, please hold while the Jedi discuss.
Yeah.
Which I thought was it was fun to see kind of both sides of that coin.
Sure.
And get both perspectives.
Yeah.
Especially with the characters they created.
Joss and Pika have like a little bit of like an eye roll at each other. Like, oh boy.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about Avar Kriss. Is the following chapter 8. Hetzel Prime, still waiting on 65 minutes now till Impact. But this is where we learn a little bit more about that connection that she has, the Song of the Force that she talks about, but some backstory on some other Jedi that we think might be prominent as time goes on. It's cool to realize that she's connected to 100 plus Jedi in the area around the Hetzel system, but that she's also connected to those back closer to the mid-rim and I guess core planets to still try to communicate. But I thought it was it was a nice introduction, as we talked about last week on the podcast, that I felt like, it was a little detached with Avar Kriss. I was waiting for more, and this is a little bit more already. We're getting hints of who she is and who she knows and her life and her time with them in the Jedi Academy. Is this kind of interesting to learn more about Elzar Mann and Stellan Gios, her two companions that they've been inseparable since they came up through the Order. So just kind of a nice backstory. We get probably more about Elzar Mann from the beginning. That was who we joked about earlier on. He doesn't work with anybody else. He just likes to do things his own. He tinkers. He does new things. He's always trying to push the Force in different directions. He doesn't want to explain himself. I love the idea of like, I'm never using the Force the same way twice. That was cool. Yeah,
he kind of makes like your like the squad, if you had like one of those like Hogan's Heroes or something. He's the tinkerer. He's the guy that's like, but because of that, he can't be like a leader in the field because he's always trying new things. But I also think we'll see in an upcoming chapter how it kind of plays into that thought process from a more of a physical sense and less of a Force sense. So I think it's cool juxtaposition to say like, all right, these people are Jedi, but then there always seems like there's like a bit of like a human counterpart, or not a human, but just a non-Jedi counterpart that does a similar thing, which I think might also be a theme they're kind of hinting at in the book. Like, is it Jedi ingenuity that is going to save them, or is it non-Jedi ingenuity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, because I think that's something that I was impressed towards the end of this. Is I'm like, oh, the Jedi aren't always solving every problem.
Right? They're not. Yeah, they're not They're not like super geniuses. They just have this skill.
Yeah, they even delegate. They're like, you're gonna have to come up with something.
You figure it out. Well, that was why it was so funny when she was like, "That's the best idea you got." And it's like, well, okay, I'm not a Jedi. I haven't been doing any training. Give me a break.
Right? Yeah.
But in this chapter, there's a little bit about Stellan Gios, just that he would make his way. But the connection of the Force goes back. This is where Avar Kriss then gets the message that's kind of, as you said, not word for word, but she realizes as she's scanning through the system that the message coming from Tiami is about the life forms who are aboard the bits of debris. And then she has to communicate to every single Jedi in the area. And I liked how they made the moment of her saying, I can't miss one, not a single one. Because if you missed a single Jedi, then they might continue to destroy when they hadn't yet, the pieces of debris with life forms on it. So kind of a cool thing to have her have that kind of willpower to need to send that message to save as many lives. And then she kind of makes that point when she's talking to Admiral Karnara, who's head of that Third Horizon, about what they now have to do, how the mission has changed. They don't need to destroy anything. And she said, we have to begin by believing it's possible to save everyone, and the Force is, if it wills otherwise, we still have to try because those lives are just as important as the ones on the world, which to me is like, that's what you want from leadership, government officials, right. Somebody being like, every life matters at the same level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not being like, well, we can't really think about the ones in the debris because
right, yeah, like,
that'll really complicate things.
Yeah, exactly. So we're just not going to worry about them.
But that's pretty much the heart of that chapter, and she returns to levitating, connecting back to the Song of the Force. Anything else that stood out to you guys in that part with Avar Kriss?
I mean, they're setting something up where she's like, there was like a note off. They kept saying that, like there was like an empty note in the Force. And I don't think they've quite let us know what that is yet.
No.
Which is a nice little seed to plant,
Yeah.
Well, I think we will probably learn a little bit more about what was in the hyperspace lane that ended up resulting in the Legacy run, altering its course, and then
what if it was just a bantha? A rogue bantha.
Somebody put a bantha out there. So from
Someone was hauling Raftars.
We resume with Bel Zettifar and Loden Greatstorm down on Hetzel Prime, which I was ready for that to be Chapter 6. I thought at the end of Chapter 5 when they had that moment of them jumping out of the Vector. But we pick up right where we left off. Suspense. And this is a lot of combination of really good setup and great humor, which I feel like is just going to be the commonplace between Bel and Loden. That just seems like we've had 2 chapters now, and there's always this playfulness that's going back and forth. He jumps out of the Vector, and he looks like he feels like he's about to die in a very undignified way as he's about to splatter like rotten fruit as he's screaming, and then he's saved by Greatstorm. He says, you're going to need a little bit more training.
It's a funny description. Splatter like rotten fruit.
I mean, is anything splatter better than rotten fruit?
Not on the fruited moon.
No, they're not on the fruited moon this time. They're Hetzel Prime.
Yeah, no.
But so we get the kind of the description of what's going on with the Ranaraki family and their guards that they've paid to protect them. Greatstorm has a very great stormy moment where he's comforting the woman by adding weight to his words with the Force, which I thought was a pretty cool way. Again, it almost felt like hypnosis in a way, but it wasn't. It was the Force.
Well, but in that chapter, they kind of, or in that line, they kind of said that it wasn't the Force. It was just he chose his words carefully.
I thought they said that it was. Okay, maybe you're right.
I read that as he was just genuinely convincing.
Huh?
No, I think he was nudging a little.
He was like kind of using.
Yeah.
I can't. I'll have to find it.
Yeah, I'm almost positive that they kind of imply that he was,
I thought
doing the old hand wave.
Well, that's what I thought. Bell thought that was good. Perhaps no one would mistake them for anything else.
What did you think in chapter?
What did you think? Yeah, I'll have to look up because I remember noting that, but it's possible I just kind of overlooked it.
This may have been when the iPad was on your face.
Yeah, exactly. I might have been just dreaming and just falling asleep.
But they had the 24 men and women guards on the wall. The guards telling them, no one else can join the ship. And Loden is saying, perhaps you should consider an early retirement. And then I like this moment where it's like, what do you think you're going to do, Jedi? Cut right through the walls, fight every one of us off? He's like, sure, why not? I thought that was really well played.
It says Loden hadn't even had to draw his weapon, hadn't used the mind touch. Loden Greatstorm had just spoken a few well-chosen words, and now... Open the gates, the guard captain said.
So you were conflating two events.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay, there it was.
He just threatens to kill them.
Yes. Yes. Got it.
Yeah, just needed the words.
Yes.
And then marauders show up.
Of course.
And they start gunning people down.
Yeah.
And then that's a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, because then we just get the moment of him saying sabers and get ready.
Sabers.
Yeah.
But I really like the interplay between the two of them. I really like Bell. I like Loden, and I already want that story on its own. Like, give me the Bell and Loden book. I'm good with sticking with them for a while.
Just two cops on the run, Bell and Loden. I agree. I think it's very cool. I think there's so much setup here, and there's like one of every kind of story so far that you'd want from like an action thing. Like Bell and Loden are kind of like you're on the ground, like detective types. Like, let's check this out. You're more standard Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon kind of thing going on. Mm-hmm. And then you have your captain drama, like your military drama kind of going. I really like that.
I'm curious if the rest of the book will be structured this way, or if there will be a point where everybody like gets together.
And it has like a dinner.
Like, I'm curious because I haven't like read ahead aside from those 2.5 pages of chapter 11, and I haven't like read anything about the plot of the book because I want to experience it as it's going. So I don't even know how much of a time period this book takes place over.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like there's different kind of like phases in this book, right?
Yeah.
There's supposedly phases overall for the High Republic, so maybe I'm using phase as the wrong choice of word here. But I know that it starts with like the Great Disaster, and then it has a couple other, kind of almost markers throughout this. It's just 3 parts.
Yeah, I have to look at the table of contents, because is it split that way where there's like chapters within sections?
Yes. So it's part 1, the Great Disaster, part 2, the Paths, and part 3, the Storm.
Oh, cool. That's cool. I wonder if it's the Loden Great Storm.
Oh, yeah. Oh. All right.
Loden and Bell is my favorite artisan furniture store.
If you ever started making Star Wars props, you'd name it Loden Bell.
Yeah.
Loden Bell.
So we wrap up with returning to our Longbeam and Aurora 3 and Joss, Adren, and Pika as they're talking with Tiami, and we get the opposite side of that conversation like we thought about. We talked about earlier, the fun of Joss kind of questioning things. He's like, what's a Jedi good for? I guess they could use their laser swords, but that's not going to do us any good here. They could stand around and look cool. I've seen them do that a lot, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then they could move things with their mind, and that's where they get the idea of let's use these mag clamps and some Garian silk, attach them to the debris, slow it down, have the Jedi kind of hold everything together. They go back and forth. Tiami's like, let me talk about that. Let me see if I can do that. And there's just the nice pauses. I like the idea of the awkward pause where she's like, 1 moment, please. And then I felt like Joss Adren, to me, felt like a less skeptical Han. He was still skeptical and still funny about it, but clearly he knew who the Jedi were and knew what their worth was. But I thought that was pretty fun, and a lot of Space Wizard references in this chapter.
I think that there's like not a lot of room for skepticism in terms of the Jedi's abilities. Mm-hmm. I think it's more skepticism about their like use and if they're overrated.
Right.
But I really liked these two. I thought they had a great dynamic. And he immediately goes into a tangent about how he thinks his wife is too good for him, which I can relate to. And so that was cool. And like they talk about how his head is like a hammer, like a stone hammer.
Yeah. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's a very
I like these two. I thought they had a good dynamic. I thought it was a cool little like it was a respite to have such a small contained interaction and be a whole chapter.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see where they go with this. I mean, we're still at the beginning of this thing.
I know. I want to know what happens. I feel like the wizard line is, again, a little piece of Star Wars comfort food right there. That's what Uncle Owen says, that crazy old wizard. So it's like, okay, they've referred to the Jedi as wizards in this universe, which is kind of funny. Like, that word exists, and it's not necessarily a term of endearment. It's like that to me says there could be other groups of people like the Jedi in this world.
Yeah.
That resemble wizards, which I think
that people are like, oh boy.
Yeah, like this guy. Yeah, exactly. Which we see some of that kind of stuff in Clone Wars, which I think is cool. So
yeah, like people standing holding up signs on a street corner and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about it before. I really like when Tiami's like, is that the best idea you have? And just funny that the Jedi would be questioning them in that way. It's like, hey, take the idea you get if you've got nothing, Jedi. But I also like then where I think Pika says, or was it Pika or was it Josh who said, the space wizards don't seem very excited about this? Yeah. I thought that was just a fun way to end it. But the chapter ends with, they throttle off, leap into space engines roaring, surface vibrating with power, and Josh says, let's find out if this works. And that's where we cap off chapter 10.
Yeah.
As you said, Ryan, it's hard to not keep reading right after that.
Yeah.
Like I said, I read the 2.5 pages of chapter 11. It didn't provide answers yet.
Wow. That sounds like a spoiler, Ryan. It doesn't tell you anything? Now I know.
Man. Yeah, I know. I don't even want to know if I don't know.
So do we all think that the impact is the end of the Hetzel system? I mean, we just talked about how part 1 is the great disaster.
Is it how Tatooine forms?
Or is impact the end of the Starlight Cruiser?
Yeah.
The end before it even begins?
Wait, say that again?
So the Starlight Beacon that they're opening up as the communications to the Outer Rim,
right.
Is that what's going to be destroyed on impact?
Because we know...
maybe. I don't know.
When we see Tatooine in the prequels, it's not like there's a Starlight Beacon nearby.
It's not like they feel like they've got a lot more communication now.
Yeah, exactly. They're pretty out on their own. So
yeah, I have a feeling the Starlight Beacon doesn't work out per se.
Well, I had that feeling from the beginning, just the way they introduced it. But are we thinking this is what the impact is, and they're going to be battling to save Hetzel Prime, and whatever evil force has developed is on its way to Starlight Beacon. That's now
we don't even have
unoccupied.
Other than these,
I see. So you don't think it'll be connected to this, where it's like one of the pieces while they're doing it? I see.
Yeah, no.
Interesting.
Perhaps. Oh, yeah. Perhaps like maybe something was put in the hyperspace highway to create this distraction.
Yeah. To create the chaos.
Oh,
sorry. I know I'm saying it like I'm realizing it, even though that's what you've been saying.
No, Ryan, Ryan, you bring up a very good point, and I know you read up chapter 11.
No, Mike,
I'm sure there's a lot of details in there.
The thing is that it's a distraction. Yeah, no, I think that's a good theory.
Well, we're gonna find out.
Good job, Mike. Good job, buddy.
Hey, we're on our way.
What do you
past
think?
9.
Let's hear what Sam thinks. Sam?
I think it's pretty good. Yeah.
Jay Leno?
Sam. That's how Sam did. Yeah, check out my Roadster again in the garage.
Oh, my God. I can't believe we got him on the show.
That's Sam, yeah.
Oh, man.
Sam, how'd you feel about icing Conan out of a job?
I feel pretty good, Yeah, I got 2 jobs out of it. Yeah.
Just ask him more about his time on Mickey and the Roadster Racers, please.
This is the kind of topical humor you can hear on our show. We talk
Sam,
about
what do you
things.
think about being on at 10 o'clock?
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's like recording this podcast. Yeah.
So topical.
You'll find a lot of impersonations on this pod. For those.
Do you guys remember the late night wars of 2009?
Yeah, I was gonna say we reference events that happened 12 years ago, inconsequential events that
it really had no impact on anything.
No impact. They all stayed on TV.
Yet I changed my profile to a Team Coco profile. Rather
we're
than
all
like
invested.
anything in the
Think
last
about
4
that.
years.
We were all in it.
Think about that, people. Think about
Little did we know. Oof.
Think about what the state of politics was then, that we were all wrapped up in if NBC was going to get Jay Leno and Conan to work it out.
You mean if they were going to do right by Conan? That's what you mean.
Of course.
Whoa.
Listen.
Late Show Wars. Read the book.
I am no fan of Leno. I'll have you know. If you
put the
must
no in
know,
Leno.
and if I need to burn another bridge on this podcast between him and Favreau, Leno is a no-go for me.
Wow. He's a Leno.
He's not a yes. He's a Leno.
There you go.
So 25 minutes before this podcast started recording, I was watching the Simpsons episode where Jay Leno helps Krusty get back into stand-up. And I thought, Jay Leno is the one that made him realize he was a sellout? What?
Yeah. You know.
Is a Leno kind of night.
Well, thank goodness someone with a lot of integrity now has that spot.
Oh, boy. Man, we've been really on a late night kick for this episode.
Oh, I need to go for Fallon now?
We came full circle.
Fallon took part in normalizing Trump, and no one's talking about it.
I think everyone
hasn't been
talk
forgotten
about
on this podcast.
No one's talking about it anymore. And I'm saying
Keep it going. I
haven't tuned in.
Hey, Ryan, you know what you do? You look at the ratings. He doesn't get them anymore, buddy. He doesn't get them.
I don't know if that's true. I haven't kept
It is
up.
true.
You know, I really wish
Bears
that
beat him out since that moment.
Yeah, pretty much. I wish that there was a villain that I could pretend that Fallon was going to have on from The Light of the Jedi, but we don't know any villains yet.
That's what I was going to say. We haven't even been introduced to an antagonist.
Yeah, everybody's just like, we are the Republic, and if nothing else, today will have been a good day. You know, like that kind of...
Yeah, I'm starting to think that they're the bad guys. People that say stuff like that all the time.
Yeah. I
weird.
thought maybe the leader of the Hetzel system would be a bad guy. Like,
well, I guess we met those people who were bogarting that ship, which is
we didn't even meet them. Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
mean
true.
the Marauders have shown up. I guess. Those are
Wait, who are the ones who are.
I love Marauders in Star Wars. It's just
but
like
even then, I mean, those are like
guy.
people who are desperate.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're not. No one is really as bad as the Ranaraki family. They're the worst ones we've met so far.
Right.
And if anything you learn from this podcast is don't trust a Ranaraki.
And anyone out there who's listening named Ronald Araki, we're not talking about you. We're not talking about Ron Araki.
We trust you. We trust you.
You're a good guy.
You're going out on a limb, but
Ronald Araki is a good man. I hope there's no monster. I hope there's no one out there who happens to be named Ronald Araki.
I hope we get an email.
You're really walking on the invisible bridge. Yeah.
Email us, droidspod@gmail.com. Follow us on social media, droidspod, and of course, droidspod on TikTok. Got a lot of new fun stuff there. Check it out. Guys, this has been another great edition of the pod. So fun to keep diving in on this book. We've got a lot more to go. I think there's 44 chapters. We're 10 in. So we've got some episodes.
Ooh, maybe we start doing 10 chapters an episode.
And I'll say this, if anyone out there knows someone named Ronald Araki, and you know, and they're not part like of some kind of fringe organization, we'll have them on the show.
Oh boy.
Wow.
We'll have to vet a little bit. We got to make sure.
Yeah, he'll be great.
We'll have to vet a little bit to make sure that they're not on any watch lists. But we have access to those.
On that note, that is going to do it for this week's edition of the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast.
What Annie? Hetzel Prime.
Ronald Araki checking in. Checking into the room for Ronald Araki.
Yeah, we got him.